time or not, young shall grow.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Spare a Thought, the podcast that shines a light on the people, ideas, issues and organisations that are often overlooked or misrepresented in the media. My name is Tom Spare, your host. In the fourth season of Spare a Thought, we're looking at what it means to be educating for the future. As technology and society evolve, how can we prepare the next generation for the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead? Over the next few episodes, we'll be talking about how the next generation of storytellers are coming through. First, with a discussion with Sam Cullis, who's the Executive Director of the London Breeze Film Festival. And we'll also be talking to the Black British Book Festival and how they're overcoming barriers for Black authors and improving representation. We'll also be talking about the relationship between climate change and universities with Jay Chard, who's a PhD student from the University of South Wales, as well as discussing how we can build sustainable communities and infrastructure with Charlie Edmonds from Civic Square. To help us find our balance, I'll be speaking to Sinead Ali, a yoga instructor who runs a community interest company called Womb, and we'll close out this part of the season with Rob Hopkins to talk about how we can fall in love with the future. My guest today is Chris Thorpe. He's the apprenticeship coordinator at a photonics company in the southwest of England and a project manager working on aerospace, defence and space projects based around laser systems. But before he got where he is today, he had a very non-linear career path. Chris's story is a powerful reminder that there is no single path to a career in science or technology. His passion for the work is contagious, and you'll hear how he uses that energy to get kids excited about STEM. From demonstrating how lasers transmit music to explaining how photonics enable everything from the internet to your favourite video games. He also shares his vision for the future, including the exciting potential of miniaturized technology to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. So, let's get into it and spare a thought for getting kids into STEM.
So I'm Chris Thorpe. I am the apprenticeship coordinator as a sort of like a sidecar role to my main role at a photonics company called Gooch & Housego. My sort of main role is actually sort of project management, and I'm currently managing 3 different space projects and also some aerospace and defense programs that are all sort of based around laser systems is sort of what we work with primarily at G&H, and also sort of in my apprenticeship coordinator role, I am responsible for STEM outreach, recruitment of apprentices, and also mentoring and training of our apprentices through their time with us at G&H.
So before we talk about the work of getting kids into STEM, I'd like to learn a bit more about you and for the audience to learn a bit more about you. So thinking back to when you were at school and that's sort of the early part of your career and you had career guidance, what did you want to do then? And does that match up to what you do now?
It actually does line up to what I wanted to do. But I think I'm a little bit of a product of the 1980s and early 90s when we had lots of space themes, sort of cartoons like Transformers and Biker Mice from Mars and stuff like that. So I was always sort of really interested in space sort of as a kid and as a teenager. I studied sort of science and art, both at quite a high level sort of in high school. My mother, in an attempt to sort of steer me on to the science subject, took me on sort of like a visit to Penn State University. So I actually went to this visit where it was all like high school seniors. So it was like the equivalent of like A-level kids going to visit, doing the open days. And I was there like 14, sort of standing up and saying, I want to study astrophysics with these kids who were already, I was 14. I was like basically finishing up on GCSEs. From there, I would say it didn't go well. I ended up sort of like failing sort of math in high school, even though I just wasn't that sort of education at that time sort of wasn't for me. And it was at that point, I didn't have the understanding of what an opportunity and what a privilege it was to have access to that kind of education, and to sort of see the value of the effort that was required to be put in to sort of get to the next step. Just not everybody works like that. Everybody sort of works and learns in different ways, and has different drivers and motivations in different times and areas of their life. But I always had a really sort of keen interest in science. And it's a funny thing about what a difference a really good teacher can make. It was sort of exactly one particular moment. I was in 8th grade, year 8, 9, whatever the equivalent is here, and we were learning about the structure of the atom. And so we're learning that there was a nucleus, and that there was these electrons in orbit around. And me, sort of being a little bit of a pain in the butt, asked the teacher, so we have the nucleus, and then we have the electrons, but what is in the space between those things? And the teacher stopped for a second. Mrs. Florig stopped for a second and was like, that's a really good question, and I don't know if anybody does actually know. And it's like that one little moment it's really, really stuck with me, in that there's always something new to find out. It's like we don't have it all figured out yet. There's still new discoveries out there to be made. And so that stuck with me, and I sort of ended up going to university a few times, and then joining you at university, at the University of Kent in Canterbury. Was my 3rd attempt at university, and it was sort of astrophysics. So it wasn't necessarily any careers, specific careers advice that I got. It was sort of like the sum of my experiences that sort of just steered me into the career that I'm in at the moment.
That's really cool. And I think it's a reminder that education isn't always necessarily a straight path, and your career and where you go to isn't always a straight path. I think there's this sort of like model of education, which is almost like a production line, and people go, you've got to do A, B, C, D. And all the most interesting people I've met have gone sort of non-linear paths, basically. So it sounds like that's the route you took. But we hear the word, or the acronym STEM quite a lot. What does it stand for, and why is there such a drive to get kids and young people into these career pathways?
STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I think that there's, in general, has been sort of like a skills shortage of people sort of in these subjects, and educated to like sort of like a high standard, because the world is sort of changing so quickly. I know just sort of within my business, there's a dearth of talent in certain age brackets. So we have sort of like our senior management and senior sort of like technical leaders who are all sort of nearing retirement age. And then there's me and maybe like a couple of other engineers who are sort of in that 30 to 45 range. And then that is just like very bottom of like the population, and sort of like that 30 to 45 range is a really low number of people in that range with sort of a high level of technical ability. And then luckily sort of there's been a real sort of like drive around STEM education, and we have a lot of young people and apprentices and things like that that are sort of like coming through the ranks to try to satisfy the sort of like the needs. I know in my business we had a bit of attrition in our apprenticeship program. The apprentices in within our business sort of fill a like a technical technician sort of like level role. So it's sort of like manufacturing support, and just to like supporting the engineering function while supporting sort of like supporting engineering and manufacturing. And because we had that little bit of attrition, we have two academic years of our apprenticeship where there is no one. And now I'm trying to get help from technicians to deliver these space programs, and I just don't have anyone to do it. So like continued drive in in STEM education. I mean, like the low tech jobs sort of like don't really exist anymore, and so you really have to emphasize that math and technology and engineering and science is just actually really important to be able to have sort of like earners and taxpayers as we go forward sort of into the next phase of humanity here, if you will.
Yeah, and I suppose it's really important for the UK to stay competitive, right? So it's all well and good the government setting objectives around AI or tech, or the UK being a leader in the sciences or in universities, but if you don't have that pipeline of people, then that's going to be very challenging, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like that's so that I mean, you put it very well. That's something sort of like we plan. So it's like, how do we actually sort of engage young people to raise sort of awareness? So we want to recruit people locally, but it's exactly sort of like the same. It's exactly the same strategy. From our point of view, we want to raise awareness about the technology and the opportunities that are available for the people in our sort of our local area. But it is all about like letting them know, and like what is the earliest we can let them know. Sort of like what are those touch points where we can engage. So like primary schools is a little bit difficult with sort of like lasers and photonics and things like that, but certainly sort of like secondary schools and in grammar schools and things like that, and even either universities as well. I'm just making sure that we have a visible presence and we bring cool stuff to the table to actually show the kids.
And so what is the main sort of age range that you're usually talking to?
We're usually talking to A-level students or Bay. You wouldn't normally you wouldn't assume it. There's a high tech cluster of businesses here, so probably a dozen or more. So like aerospace and photonics companies that are down here that sort of like grew out of the telecoms boom, and sort of like the late 90s or early 2000s. The kids don't know that things are actually here, and so it's about either letting people know about apprenticeships who like sort of like might want to go from so like school directly into a career, or letting sort of like the A-level students know, because we have 3 local grammar schools. So the kids that go to sort of like Oxbridge and the Russell Group universities, it's like that you don't have to then move away somewhere else. You can come back here. There are high tech careers available here.
What is your pitch to the younger audience? So if you do go into like sort of the early stages of high school versus what's your pitch to A-level students when you're going into their class, and I guess university students as well? Is it that thing of the locale, the pay? What sort of the main messages do you try to get across to them?
Well, the easiest sort of relatable subject is the internet, because it's specifically in my field, photonics is responsible for the modern era of data transmission and data storage, and everything is all enabled by photonics and lasers. So I'm very, very proud, G&H. So anytime a signal is sent from point A to point B, it is more than a greater than 50% chance that it goes through what's called a fused fiber optic coupler that was manufactured right here in Torquay. And it's those components sort of that go into these higher level systems of all the data transmission in the data centers that enable all that technology. And so there are these giant undersea cables that actually carry all the data. So from North America over to Europe, and I'm working on a project right now that sort of links up all the Caribbean islands to enable sort of like, well, we're talking over the internet now. I can see you can see me, and all this data and all these pixels and ones and zeros all being transmitted over fiber optic cables is being transmitted by lasers and received by special detectors, and it's all that technology that G&H and the high tech cluster within Torbay enables, and so that's sort of like my pitch to high school level students and to sort of like A-level students. So it's anytime you turn on your TikTok, I'm such an old man now, and anytime you turn on your TikTok or you log on to the Fortnite, then that data that's being transmitted is going through photonic components, and you can actually work on that. We have a nice demo that we've set up recently that demonstrates the free what we call free space transmission of data. And so we have a laser. Well, it's quite easy. We can pop into it. Who wants to talk about laser beams? And it's like, I don't know what that is, but it sounds pretty cool. We have a laser which you can hook up to any audio device that has a 3.5 millimeter jack, and you plug it into a 3.5 millimeter jack. You press play on whatever audio you want, and then on that laser you have encoded into it music. And so we have a special detector that's hooked up to a speaker, and you can have this light floating around in your hand, and you shine that laser onto this detector, and music plays. And you can sort of like chop your hand in front of it and turn the music on and off. The kids have been really, really engaged with it. I do want to do a test and see how far we can do it. We've been doing this at careers fairs, so in like the sports halls and things like that. I want to get it set up sort of on either end and really do a proper test of it. Or field trials. That's very similar to, I guess, a lot of the advancements were like what is the next phase in terms of data transmission. And it's like satellites, or like Earth to ground, Earth to sort of like satellites, and some like back and forth, and satellite to satellites, or like optical links. So instead of actually being sort of like tethered by the fiber optic cable, it's going to be sort of like this free space transmission where you don't have a physical sort of medium that you're transmitting the data over. And so that kind of cool stuff. And we put lots of stuff into space. So it is that sort of like that next phase that that G&H is helping to enable. Space is an easy application area to sell, and it gets going, well, yeah, space, let's put stuff into space. The practicality of it is there's lots and lots and lots of paperwork.
When you have those ideas about maybe projecting the laser across a sports hall, it probably brings out your inner child too, right? Yeah.
Well, when I finally got it working, I called my guys, my colleagues, come here, check this stuff out. And even like my colleagues just see the big smile on my face. They're like, "You love this stuff, don't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude, it's fun." I'm a big child, and I get to go play with big boy toys every day. One of my older apprentices, he's sort of new into engineering. I knew he was going to be good because he just had the right sort of headspace and personality for it. And we were verifying some test equipment because we have to send some of these devices that are going to go into space. We have to send them to Belgium to be irradiated at a proton accelerator facility. Yeah, it's pretty cool. They have to stay at the proton accelerator facility for about 3 months because they're going to be radioactive for quite some time. And so we just had to set up a couple bits of electronics and things like that, make sure we had all the stuff that we needed to send to Belgium. And we were just sort of moving stuff back and forth, putting a few things together. It was like, we're getting paid to do this right now. Isn't this fun? It's like, I can't believe it. So yeah, it is just, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's cool. And I'm sure that enthusiasm probably rubs off on the kids as well. So in this series of podcasts, so we're looking at educating for the future. And I'm not asking you to predict the future, but rather sort of imagine what the future might look like. Could you describe the world you see in sort of 10 years or 20 years time when the kids in the classes you're visiting are working in STEM? What are the challenges? What sort of challenges are they facing when they're working in STEM? What are you imagining, or what would you like to see the world for those kids in STEM? What sort of problems are they trying to face, do you think?
It's difficult to sort of imagine, well, because you're sort of a politics man, is just sort of like the level of uncertainty, so that we and the general sort of geopolitical climate at the moment is quite sort of uncertain. So I like to imagine so that we get past our own hubris and don't fall victim to one of the explanations of the Fermi paradox. So like, where is everybody? Oh no, people get too smart and they end up wiping themselves out. let's leave AI to the side for one moment, which is definitely sort of like a big subject. But the next sort of thing in sort of like STEM and STEM research is really a miniaturization, in what we call photonic integrated circuits. A lot of the technology that we work with in photonics now is this fiber optics based. And you end up with these assemblies and sort of like sub assemblies that then go into higher sort of like customer facing or consumer facing devices. They're sort of on the size of about, I don't know, like a rugby ball, something like that. And what we're actually working on at the moment at G&H, I think it's probably still 5-10 years off. So actually like at least sort of like towards actually getting developed into systems, is they take the system that is the size of a rugby ball and make it the size of a grain of sand. And it's that sort of leap in technology that is going to be sort of the next big thing. So one of the big areas that we're in at G&H is medical imaging technology, OCT, which is optical coherence tomography, which is a very fancy set of words there. And it's a non-invasive medical imaging, so you can use lasers and fiber optics to be able to see inside of a person without actually cutting inside of them. And it's very important for ophthalmology, so doing some like retinal scans and for skin cancer and for cardiology. And those systems are so big and so expensive that it really sort of restricts care to sort of developing nations and things like that. And so in developing nations, trying to create sort of low cost OCT systems for retinal scans. So retinal scans can be used to detect sort of early signs of diabetes. And so if you don't have access to these OCT systems in developing countries, and you're unable to sort of like get that early diagnosis and being able to identify the correct interventions to have better patient outcomes, the cost of these things are sort of on the order of like tens of 20,000s of pounds, even just for the things that we make. And so the top level system is hundreds of thousands of pounds. If you can just print it onto a tiny little microchip and then put that in something, you can make these things in essentially like foundries. You just print them and you can just buy the tens of thousands. And so the actual cost of things goes down to like by orders of magnitude. You get that sort of like same level of shrinkage. So you go from this football size thing that costs tens of thousands of pounds, then you can go down to this tiny little grain of sand size thing. And sort of like the idea is that there would be a sort of a reduction in price and sort of like a higher availability for these sort of really high tech systems. And so that's sort of like the next phase of technology, I think, in photonics, and sort of like what the things that I work on and what my kids would probably be working on as well, just making those systems so like more robust and more reliable. Because there's one thing making something in a lab, and then it's like another thing to sending it to sort of like Central Africa and having that thing actually survive. It's sort of like operational lifetime. So that would be sort of like the next things that kids are working on. I'm not an AI person sort of at all. I mean, I use ChatGPT for like, because I'm a scientist and an engineer at the end of it. I mean, I find writing sort of like dry informational reports and instructions very easy. But if I have to do sort of like creative writing, like I have to write a reference for someone or something like that, or like work on my CV, I'm just like, oh, this is boring, I don't want to do it. It's sort of like that level of that's sort of like creative writing. Where I have done sort of creative writing in the past because I'm really into music and things like that. Is how AI is used, because I read a study recently that how people use AI affects their own creativity. And so even if you have someone that sort of like doesn't necessarily use AI as sort of like the end all be all, like they just type in the prompts and then they just use whatever spits out, even if they use it just to give it a little extra spice, to just proofread or whatever, or just reword it and things like that. If they're asked to do the same thing but without AI, they find it more difficult. And so we're actually like the article actually says like our brain is like a muscle, and if you don't use it, then it's just basically going to go to waste. Then you're not going to be able to do all these things that is sort of associated with being as intrinsically sort of human. And it's like sort of like joke posts. It's like I wanted AI to come and do my dishes, not take up and do all the art. I wanted to do that stuff. You take the bull crap that I don't want to do. So I think how I imagine it, or how I would sort of like it to be, I think that there's going to be a big swing towards AI, and then hopefully sort of a realization that's like, maybe this isn't, we're making ourselves really dumb. So either swing towards AI and, well, who knows, maybe an integration sort of like into it eventually, maybe like 50, 100 years down the road. But then I guess in the short term, maybe like a swing sort of away from it, and the realization that maybe this isn't sort of like the best thing for ourselves. When I was in school, there was no sort of like computer programming or anything like that. But now in school, like my daughter sort of like learns programming. So I think it does, even though programming and computers and computer science was sort of like really important, I guess sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s was really sort of important at university. And that was a thing that sort of like people strive to do. It didn't really filter down sort of into the lower levels of education and early levels of education. And I think that it takes so long for things to actually filter down into the education system, and for sort of like government policies and advice to change and things like that. I think it needs to change like double quick, because the AI is just changing sort of every day, and what it's capable of today is not going to be what it's capable of tomorrow. And so kids learning how to use that, teachers learning how to sort of interpret like the use of AI and how to actually make AI sort of like work for them. And then kids with like sort of like prompt engineering, and sort of learning how to get the best out of AI, and also training them, and for them to be able to do their sort of first point research, and to be able to understand and interpret the things that AI is saying to them. One of the things I sort of did you know about AI is that ChatGPT is not very good at doing math. Because it's a language model, and so it's not really sort of built necessarily. Well, I guess the main one, I guess you can dig down into other like versions of ChatGPT or what have you, but sort of like the main one, the free one, is not very good at doing math. And that's how math teachers sort of uncover that people are asking ChatGPT to do math homework for them, because it doesn't get the answers right. There's like weird rounding errors and things like that. And one of my colleagues at G&H has actually tried this out. And yeah, you try to give it sort of like a simple Excel sheet with a column of numbers and ask it to get the average, and it doesn't do it properly. It just doesn't do it properly. So you have to be able to. Well, almost like with anything, anytime I approach sort of a new, well, not a new subject, a new problem sort of around the subject matter that I'm sort of an expert in, I suppose, is I'd always try to form a scientific method. You form a hypothesis. You have this problem, and this problem with a set of variables. Change one of those variables, and you try to predict what the outcome is going to be. And usually we're sort of in the right ballpark, and then you say, I kind of understand what's happening here. And then that's sort of like I think the kind of approach that you need to take with the output from AI. You need to understand things yourself first, and then you sort of ask AI for the support, just to add in the extra little flavor and that little spice. I was very lucky. I was afforded lots of opportunities by moving to the UK. I went to university when there were sort of like low fees and things like that. I was like the year before the higher fees started and everything. And sort of South Devon is one of the most sort of like socioeconomic sort of deprived areas in the UK, if not in Europe in general. And so it's really important to me. Like I love this area. I feel sort of like adopted by it, And it's really important for me to like show these kids about sort of like what is possible, and to explain sort of like my very non-linear failing high school math, the third attempt at university, and all these things. So sort of all these things, and realizing that's like, yeah, these really cool things are literally right around the corner from you, and you can go do it. I mean, it does sort of seem hard, like I'm saying all these crazy words like optical coherence tomography and stuff like that. And it's like everything, the first time you do anything, it is hard. It's like the first time you played Fortnite, you got killed a bunch of times. It's like there's no two ways around it. Or so it really just takes perseverance, and the drive to do it, and belief in yourself, and then can do it. Anybody can do it.
What I love most about the conversation, like I had today with Chris, is not having a career and an education that is a straight path. His own journey is proof of that, and it's a message that's so important for young people to hear. I'm so grateful to Chris for joining me and for sharing his enthusiasm and passion for what he does. His work is inspiring the next generation of engineers and scientists. When we were recording this episode, it was one of the hottest days of the year. Chris's 2 kids were home, his partner heavily pregnant. Not long after this interview, his partner Ida gave birth to their 3rd child, so huge congratulations to Ida and Chris. You can find all the links, places to listen to Spare a Thought and connect with me on social media in the show notes. The title track for this show is Young Shall Grow. Credit and thanks to Afro Cluster, Magugu and Asha Jane. Listening to Chris talk about his excitement for his work and the fun he has with his colleagues reminded me of the joy of sort of bringing out your inner child in what you do. That's the kind of joy that the world needs more of, and it's a powerful motivator for anyone considering a career in STEM. Thank you for listening. This episode was researched, written and edited by me, your host, Tom Spare. Spare a Thought is a Be The Change Media Network production. Thanks for listening.
Whether you like them or not, young shall grow. Better fill them with love. Them to know. In this life you don't give up, even when you know. If you fall, get back up. Young shall grow. Whether you like them or not, young shall grow.